What?
Like, how could you open a laptop? Desktop and all I can understand. Like, laptop.
Oh,
Like
I've opened it up loads of times.
See,
I've opened up laptops loads of times.
if we give some broken bits to share,
We have 2 iPads.
I can open it up.
It's already open. So screen is broken.
Yeah, I'm opening up iPads and tablets is a bit more difficult. But there's a little technique to it, and you need a special tool. You understand? There's no screws,
yeah.
right? So it's a wedging tool you have to use, and it causes a little bit of damage. But anyway, it's doable. I would do it. I do it just to find out. Like autopsy. I do it just for the sake of doing an autopsy. Okay, we're live. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. The camera's not bad on this. So.
But you need a webcam or something?
No, it's
No,
okay.
it's fine.
The laptop's camera isn't so bad.
Okay. You just
I honestly, I'm astonished by the fact that it worked. I was doing it thinking, the only reason why you're doing it is because you like tinkering and you like DIY. This is going to be a fail. You're just relaxing. I'm making all these excuses. Don't be disappointed if it doesn't work. And then, and then it worked.
No, he was saying to himself.
Yeah, I'm telling myself because I'm expecting it not to work. It's going to be another one of those weird kind of solutions somebody said online, and it's not going to work.
Actually, I think did you go online and confirm to him that you did that?
Oh no, I didn't. I should. That I really should. No, the reason why I tried it was because there were comments. The comments. Right? People were. So when he did it, he soldered a piece of wire between the two joints, right? But that took up a bit of space, and a little bit of it poked up from here. So he actually damaged his mouse pad a little bit, but it worked. And then other people were like, "Oh, you don't need to do this. You can buy conducting tape, and you can do this, and you can." And then somebody said, "A bit of kitchen foil and electrical tape did it for me." And I was like, "That's the one I'm doing. I'm not spending any money." There we go. It's done. Could you check it for us, Amjad? We should get proper sound because these are connected. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem amma ba'd. So today we're not going to start a new surah, right? Because we actually have started the surah, but there's been a bit of a gap, and I'm going away tomorrow, so I won't be here next Friday. So somebody will one of the other imams will cover. So I thought we should just have a halaqah, inshallah, just have a discussion about whatever, and you guys can, because we have so many of these free sessions, open sessions, but since we started doing the Quran thing, we haven't had one for a while. Okay, so I'll start off with something. Brothers and sisters online as well. I think what I'll do today is I'll keep an eye on. I think everybody can see and hear properly, so I'll keep an eye on. How does this work? I keep an eye on the chat, right?
Yeah.
So if anybody has something to say, or anybody has a question or something like that, they can ask in the chat. Yeah, this one's on. This one's on. So maybe I'll turn this one on. There we go. That's better. So I'll start with this. This is a little bit of what I taught just now upstairs. That a lot of people aren't aware of. This is a fiqh issue, but I feel like it's something that maybe one of these days we should do a khutbah on, actually. And this is the issue of who is a mahram, right? Who is a mahram? And usually, what is commonly known, what is, if you like, ma'lum min ad-din bid-darura, or absolutely like everybody recognizes, okay, this is the reference for this, is the verse in Surah An-Nisa, right at the end of the fourth juz, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, حرمت عليكم أمهاتكم وبناتكم وأخواتكم وعماتكم وخالاتكم. That verse, yes? إلى آخر الآية. So, in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lays out who are the people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made haram upon men to marry. Yeah? And in that verse, Allah mentions your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, your paternal and maternal aunts, your brothers' daughters, your sisters' daughters, your foster mothers, your foster sisters, meaning, you understand what that means? Foster? No. What's a foster mother or not? Breastfed, yes. So if a woman breastfeeds you, she is your foster mother, right? And then she now becomes your mahram, i.e. marriage is haram. So your foster mothers, foster sisters. So it's basically ummahatukum min al-rada'ati. So ummahatukum allati arda'anakum wa akhawatukum min al-rada'a. So your mothers your foster mothers who've given you, who've breastfed you, and your sisters from fostering, your foster sisters. So the daughters of that woman. All right. Then your mothers-in-law, your stepdaughters under your guardianship, if you have consummated marriage with their mothers. So you marry a woman, she has a daughter from another marriage. If that marriage is consummated, then that girl is also permanently your mahram. But if it's not consummated, then it's not. Right? But if you have not, then you can marry them. So the verse clearly says, right? فَإِن لَمْ تَكُونُوا دَخَلْتُمْ بِهِنَّ فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ. There's no blame if you marry them, if you've not consummated the marriage with this woman. And then the wives of your sons, your daughter-in-laws, right? And you cannot marry two sisters at the same time. So if you marry a woman, then her sisters are haram for you while you are married to her. So that means if you divorce her, then you can marry the sister, but while you're married, and so on, right? But there's a more comprehensive discussion about this, right? There's a wider fiqhi discussion about this. And I want to quickly share that, and then we can open up. So this is the wider fiqhi discussion about who is haram for men to marry, right? Or this idea of mahramiyya, right? And I've lost the place. So first and foremost, there's several categories. The first category is haram by blood kinship. So these are your relatives. So these are already been mentioned in the verse, right? So mothers, grandmothers, and on up, mother's side and father's side. Yes? Then you've got sisters, right? Daughters all the way down, daughters, granddaughters, great-granddaughters all the way down. Then maternal, paternal aunts, right? So these are all relational mahrams, right? So this is one category of people who are haram. The second category, so the first category is haram due to blood relation. Yeah? Okay. Your nieces as well. So your nieces, so your brother's children, and your sister's children, also your mahrams. Then you have relations from fostering, i.e. a woman who's breastfed you. Here there is a rule, right? يُحَرَّمُ مِنَ الرَّضَاعَةِ مَا يُحَرَّمُ مِنَ النَّسَبِ is a rule, as a قاعدة كلية basically. And that is that all that becomes prohibited due to blood relation is also prohibited due to fostering. So all of those relationships mentioned before, they all become mahram when a woman breastfeeds a child. All right. So this relationship is in the Hanafi school. I actually don't know what the rulings are across the schools. I can't remember it. I read it once a while back. That in the Hanafi school, this relation is established whether the baby is breastfed directly or if the milk is pumped and then fed via a bottle, but provided that the breastfeeding has happened within 2.5 years of birth. How much milk is drunk is a conversation that the fuqaha have. one of the qawa'id that they use is if the child has been fed with a view to feeding the child, right? So deliberately done due to feeding the child, then other fuqaha talk about even if it's a single suckle or two, but whatever the case may be, if the child has been breastfed, then fostering is established. And once fostering is established, all of those relationships come into the circle of mahramiyah, which of course means two things, right? One is that child is your mahram, and all of the rules associated with that, hijab, etc., also apply to this, right? The second thing, of course, means marriage is prohibited, right? Which means being aware. It's kind of when fostering happens and breastfeeding happens, it's kind of necessary for people to be aware that it's happened and for it to be known. Does that make sense? A bit like how when people are married, the Prophet ﷺ said, "A'linu nikaha walau bid-duf," right? That announce the marriage even if you have to beat the drum, right? Yeah, and make it in the masajid, right? Why? Because it's supposed to be something publicly known. Because these relationships have consequences, have shari'i consequences. So it's kind of the same. If you end up, being suckled by a woman, then people should know about it. Your family should know about it. Your parents should know about it. Your relatives should know about it. So that it's known, so that you don't accidentally end up marrying, unbeknown to you, you don't end up marrying your foster sibling. The other thing is, this happens quite often between relatives, right? And nobody knows, and people do end up in a haram relationship. Allah forgive them, of course. If they don't know, then they don't know. But it happens quite often in societies where, on the one hand, fostering happens innocently. Like mum's gone somewhere, her sister is there with babysitting the child. She's also got a baby. Do you understand? What's the harm, right? They'll just do it. But then it kind of gets forgotten, right? And then that child ends up marrying his or her cousin, right? So this is it's an important thing. The next thing is relationship of marriage. These are the in-law relationships. There are 4 types of people to whom marriage becomes unlawful permanently due to the relationship of marriage, right? One's wife, mother, mother-in-law, grandmother, on up. Marriage with her becomes unlawful just by contract of marriage. One's wife's daughter from a previous marriage, I mentioned that's mentioned in the verse. If it's consummated permanently, haram. The wife of one's son, grandson, and on down. This is regardless of whether the son is whether the marriage is consummated or otherwise. The wife of one's son, your daughter-in-law, becomes your mahram the moment your son marries her. Consummation, non-consummation, doesn't matter. These are permanent. This is permanent tahrim. That means she's your mahram even if your son divorces her. Yeah. Yes. It's very important. One stepmother, step-grandmother, and on up. What does that mean? It means that those women who have been in the marriage of one's father or paternal or maternal grandfather. So dad's got more than one wife. Granddad's got more than one wife, and so on. So those the step-grandmother, and on up, right, are all mahrams. Yeah. So these ones are kind of well known, right? Here's another one. Prohibition due to illicit sexual activity. So whoever commits zina with a woman, her mother and on up, and daughter and on down become unlawful to him. All right? And she has become forbidden to his father on up and sons and on down. Now, what happens when there's zina within the family? Absolute disaster. And I hate to say this, it's very, very common. And it's because, and the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Hamwal Maut, right? He said the husband's relatives, for example, the Ahma, are death. They're like death. Because the Prophet ﷺ, this is the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ was saying that that a man and woman should not be in khalwa together, right? He was prohibiting khalwa, and so somebody asked him, you know, afara'it al-hamu, and he said, al-hamu al-maut. He said, what about the in-laws? Can I, you know, like my husband's relatives, or if a wife's husband's relatives are here, can she be alone with them? You understand? And the Prophet said, al-hamu al-maut. In today's society, I reckon if you did an anonymous survey, you'd find a high percentage of zina among ahma. Of zina. And in some communities, it's really bad. Like it's at really crazy proportions, where the cultural informality among in-laws is causing zina, and people are none the wiser. But these are particularly dangerous because tahrim, wider tahrim occurs. Does that make sense? Right? And also people should be cautious about within the in-law context, even if like a father-in-law, daughter-in-law, they're already mahram now. Do you understand? But people should still be, father-in-law should be careful about physical contact, you know, with the daughter-in-laws and so on and so forth. In certain cultures, there's a tendency to like daughter-in-laws are, you know, there's like culturally, daughter-in-laws are there's a lot of opportunity for physical contact for the sake of per dabana, you know, daughter-in-laws massaging the father-in-law's legs, massaging his shoulders, and you know, stuff like that. Do you understand? As a matter of khidmah. These things are potentially dangerous because some fuqaha say that the tahrim happens upon sexual arousal between two people. Does that make sense? Even if it's one-sided. Even if it is one-sided. So, yeah, something to be, you know, to be concerned about. But that zina one is a particular issue. If zina happens among relatives, sometimes there are consequences that result in lifelong haram, right? Because a man has, in some situations, you can work it out in your mind, but in some scenarios, the man's wife becomes haram for him. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can, you know, I don't even want to mention it because of where the zina happened. Do you understand who was involved in the zina? Because of that, a man's wife can become haram. Okay. So you know, it kind of brings this whole "wala taqrabu zina innahu kana fahisha" into sharp focus, right? Don't go anywhere near it because it's not just about the act of zina. There are other consequences, serious consequences. Okay, and even without them, of course, zina is bad enough, even without those consequences. And finally, other prohibitions are prohibition due to religious difference. So a Muslim is only allowed to marry a Muslim, a Christian, and a Jew, right? There's some minority opinions about Magians, etc., which people have entertained in places like India, where the non-Muslim community are Hindus and so on, which generally the majority opinion is that it's haram, right? But of course, we know this is happening in India. Celebrities are popularizing Muslims are marrying not non-Muslims but Hindu women. Right, so Islam accepts a marriage between a Muslim man and a Christian woman, a Muslim man and a Jewish woman, right? But it doesn't accept you know, وَلَا تَنْكِحُ الْمُشْرِكَاتِ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنْ. Do not marry mushrikat حَتَّى يُؤْمِنْ. But some people have tried to find loopholes for the permissibility of marrying a Hindu woman, for example, in India, where it occurs quite a lot. Does that make sense? Where a Muslim boy falls in love with a Hindu girl and stuff like that. And vice versa. Vice versa is obviously categorically haram. There's no alternative opinion in that scenario. You understand? It's haram. For a Muslim girl to marry a Jew, a Christian, or anyone of any other religion other than a Muslim, she's not allowed to marry anybody else. Why? Because there's a psychological and a legal reason for it. The legal reason is that the child follows the religion of the father. So therefore, when a woman marries a non-Muslim, you've just made a generation non-Muslim. But psychologically, it's also true. Psychologically and socially. Psychologically and socially, the child follows the father as well. But also psychologically, the woman ends up following her husband. And there's a power differential. There's a power differential that is also extremely dangerous, and therefore a Muslim woman may only marry a Muslim man. Okay. And prohibition due to gender, so therefore there's no same-sex marriage in Islam. Prohibition due to being human, and the fuqaha actually have discussed this, right? A human can't marry a jinn. Marrying animals. I bet you when the fuqaha were thinking about this, they were thinking hypothetically. Somebody went, but what about this? What if a man wanted to marry his camel? Would that be permissible? And the fuqaha were like, oh no, this is and they basically made it happen. They never thought that it would actually happen, right? Probably, anyway. And then comes the 21st century. They never imagined the 21st century. The 21st century arrives, and you got people marrying their dogs. Do you understand? And all kinds of things. Yeah. So it's bizarre. But anyway, yeah. So there's a little bit more. There's some mythology around the marriage to jinns. There's a mythology around it. There's a myth. There's mythology that Sulaiman alayhi salam married the queen of Sheba, Bilqis, and Bilqis was half jinn. It's a myth. There's no authenticity to this, which means that her parents were human and jinn, right? There's this type of mythology that exists, which may have brought up the question of, oh, is that permissible? But animals was definitely hypothetical for them, unless I suppose homosexuality existed before Islam, so maybe this stuff existed as well. Prohibition due to irrevocable divorce. A man irrevocably divorces a woman. According to the majority opinion, it is not permissible for a man to marry his ex-wife whom he has divorced 3 times. If you pronounce divorce 3 times, the majority opinion is khalas, irrevocable, permanent tahrim, until if she marries another man and then her new husband dies or divorces her and the marriage is consummated, only then may her previous husband, who had issued 3 divorces, remarry her. And then there is the minority opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi that has become popular now and has become a solution for a lot of ignorant people who think that if I'm angry at my wife, give her 3 divorces. And then it's like, oh, I never meant it. And then people have borrowed from Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi fatwa that 3 divorces is equals to 1. And then prohibition due to combining blood relations. It is not permissible for a man to marry 2 sisters at the same time, to marry an aunt and a niece at the same time, to marry a mother and daughter at the same time, and so on. So this is like a whole, if comprehensively when you look at this issue, it goes from the lens of just who am I not allowed to marry. There is this wider conversation. So there you go. I thought I'd share that with you guys since I just taught it. Which, if one of my students is in the other room, is going to think, oh, I just went through that for like an hour and a bit. Why is he repeating himself? Yes.
By extension of what you were saying, I guess this whole idea of milk banks, etc., is not allowed.
No. Yeah, the idea of milk banks, etc., would not be permissible shar'an unless it could be permissible. If it was managed in an Islamic context, this milk banks, etc. If it was managed, then the person, there'd have to be some sort of legal documentation. There'd have to be legal documentation, as in, this is from such and such a person who is the daughter of so and so. Does that make sense? So that if that milk is bought, and it would have to be, you understand? It's like, I don't know how they process this stuff, but it would have to be done in a way where it's known. So if a child drinks a portion of milk, it would have to be recorded whose milk that is, because all of those women are
adoption.
Yes, so and equally adoption. The question of adoption is a really pertinent question, because in the West, the question of adoption is a pertinent question. In fact, I was in a symposium where this was discussed, and a paper was delivered on it, because social services and and the services that deal with the adoption of children, orphans, and kids who end up in the system. Their feedback is that there is a crisis in adoption for Muslim children, because Muslim children are ending up in the system. Muslim children are ending up orphans. There's children who are refugees, etc. So there are all kinds of the need is there for Muslims to adopt Muslim children, but not enough Muslims are adopting and fostering. So there's there's the traditional sense of fostering, i.e. breastfeeding a child, but then there is the foster care system in the UK. So there's a shortage of Muslims fostering children as well as adopting children, right? And that created a whole conversation among ulama as to, well, what do we do about this? So there's two parts to this. One is, okay, should we? And the answer is yes, because what happens when Muslim children are being fostered by non-Muslims is that, well, they end up becoming more distanced from Islam. Even worse is when Muslim children get adopted by non-Muslims, right? No, khalas, adoption in the West is, you turn them into, they become your child, right? There are no other rules. It's your child, okay? So both Muslims need to step up for both. However, there are guidelines, and those guidelines are where it becomes somewhat unattractive for people. So this is the thing: the Shari'i guidelines around adoption and around fostering makes adoption and fostering very unattractive. And this is where more guidelines need to be written. So in fostering, the complication, of course, is that while they're children, it's okay. While they're not baligh, so if you're fostering children who are not baligh, then it's okay. But the deterrent for when they are baligh is that if the woman of the house has to be in hijab around the boys that she's fostering, and the girls who are being fostered have to be in hijab in front of the man who is fostering these children. Fostering in the foster care sense, right? Of course, it's the thing about fostering is, in some ways, it's a no-brainer. If you're a couple who's in your, say, late 40s, early 50s, so you're still relatively young, still physically capable, intellectually capable, and so on, and and you take on foster parents, you take on foster children. The system pays you. It's not free. It's not a free service, right? So financially, it can be a no-brainer for people, but also as a Muslim, you're doing a great favor to these children. They need good, stable homes, and you're providing that to these children. And these children often have very good memories of good foster homes, right? But then Muslims are like, oh, they're not comfortable with it. And they're not comfortable with it for a number of reasons. For religious Muslims, one point of discomfort is the issue of the Shari'i rules, right? But the guideline from an Islamic perspective is, well, we should, for the sake of the benefit of Muslim children who may lose out from a Muslim home and end up in a non-Muslim home, we should be willing to make those compromises. Does that make sense? We should be willing to, and we should still foster those kids and just be mindful of the rules and so on. Especially if you're the practicing Muslim woman who's fostered a boy who is 14, 15, and you're committed to hijab, then you have to be, there is a restriction on your life in your own home. You understand? And I know this because it's like when my wife comes home and she can take her hijab off, it's a big like, oh, I can finally take my hijab off and just relax. Do you understand? And a Muslim woman would be deprived of that. Of course, we can take advantage of certain rulings, like if a woman is elderly and fostering, then there is a hukm in the Quran that elderly women who are beyond the age of sexual attraction they can as long as they're not trying to also put makeup on and beautify themselves and so on, they may take the hijab off around those who are already always in their presence. Right? So وَالْقَوَاعِدُ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ اللَّاتِي لَا يَرْجُونَ نِكَاحًا فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْهِنَّ جُنَاحٌ أَنْ يَضَعْنَ ثِيَابَهُنَّ غَيْرَ مُتَبَرِّجَاتٍ بِزِينَةٍ. Right, this verse. It's old women who are beyond the age of having any hope in marriage. Right? They have no hope of marriage anymore. They've reached that age. Then there is no blame against them if they take their hijab down without being such that they adorn themselves to show their beauty. Do you understand? So there's that thing that you can perhaps take advantage of for older fosterers. Now, adoption is emotionally challenging because of the fact that you'll go through the same situation with a child you've brought up, that you've raised. You may have adopted a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. Now, yes, nowadays you can artificially lactate. I think you can take drugs that create the hormones in your body that make a woman lactate. So if you adopt a baby, a woman can breastfeed that baby, and khalas, the child is your mahram. You understand? So you can get around that issue if it's a child. But if you've adopted a 5-6-year-old, then at least in the Hanafi school, for example, that wouldn't apply. And then when that child becomes, if that's a boy, when that child becomes an adult, then the woman has to wear hijab in front of him and so on. You have to kind of raise that child the way in religious families we are with our nephew, with our, like the way my wife, how my wife has been with my nephews, right? She's watched them grow up. She's been sassy, chachi, basically, to them. She's been like a mum, right? And then they grow up, and then they reach 13, 14, and suddenly she now has to be in hijab in front of them. Do you understand? So you kind of have to go through that kind of a journey with a child that you've adopted. Now, the reason why this is, from a Shari'i point of view, is no issue is because there is no such thing as modern day adoption in Islam. We do not adopt to benefit ourselves. We adopt purely to benefit the child. So our idea of tabanni or adoption is about doing an act of generosity to the child, which means your intention is not to benefit in the dunya. This isn't you becoming a father. This isn't you becoming a mother. This is you doing a favor to that child. Even if that child becomes your mahram because of breastfeeding, even then. And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to not give Zayd ibn Haritha his name. Ud'uhum li'abaihim huwa aqsatu 'inda Allah. Right? Call them by their fathers' names. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala advised the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that Zayd radiyallahu anhu should not be referred to as Zayd ibn Muhammad, which is how he became known, right? But rather, he has to become Zayd ibn Haritha. He has to be known by his father. They cannot lose their lineage. They cannot lose their biological identity. Or they're not biological, it's the wrong word. They cannot lose their lineage, right? Their genealogical identity cannot be lost. So whoever their real father is, who passed away and they became orphaned, father and mother passed away, they became orphaned. Now you've adopted that child. That child must know that who their mother and father and their family is, and they must be known as those people's children who you have adopted, not as your adopted child. There's a subtle difference here. So those are some of the guidelines. What is?
Changing the name, the lineage. There's no changing the name of that.
I mean, it's not possible to change it. It's changing the lineage of, the child cannot, it's haram for the adopting parent to give that child their name. Because Allah forbade it. In the Quran, it's categoric.
So in the UK law, adoption could mean that you don't change the lin. Because from my understanding, the Arabic tabanni in Arab country, it means changing the name, which is totally haram. You can't.
No, you can't.
But
If you change the child's name, then you've gone against Nas Quran.
Yeah. So, but I mean, is there in the UK adoption? Does that mean that you can adopt a child without changing his name?
Yeah.
Is that meaning?
Yeah, that's up to you. Because adoption is a legal process, right? Once you've legally adopted the child, you can give the child whatever name you want. Give them your surname, don't give them your surname, it's up to you. And it's even easier for Muslims because we don't have a culture of giving surnames to children. Do you understand? Like we don't adopt the same surname for our own children because we don't have a surname culture. Does that make sense? Only now, because as Muslims have moved into the West, we've adopted surnames. You understand? It's only people who were exposed to the British established system in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, who adopted surnames back home. People who weren't, people who were in rural areas, never had consistent surnames. Yeah? So it was only the educated people who were in contact with British officials and the British customs in back home in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. They adopted surnames because they adopted the British system.
This system, some in the last research brought up to cover the zina thing because they don't want to acknowledge the nasab, is it? This system, the first name saying.
No, because in Islam, zina is encouraged to hide zina. So in Islam, it's encouraged to hide zina. So the Prophet ﷺ, there's a famous hadith, right, that if zina occurs, do you understand? Then al-waladu lil-firash walil-ahir al-hajar. This is famous ruling in fiqh, right? That if a child is born out of zina, like the mother has committed zina or the suspicion of zina, etc., etc. If there's suspicion, then you ignore it. You ignore it, right? And al-waladu lil-firash, the child belongs to the marital bed. Do you understand? Now, as painful as that may be, that means that you, as the husband, treat that child as your own. Because by doing so, you are saving that child from the disgrace of being known as a waladu zina, being known as an illegitimate child for the rest of his life. So therefore, the child belongs to, even if the people who committed the adultery are punished, they're caught and punished. The hadith acknowledges the one who committed the zina will be stoned. Even then, the child will belong to the marital bed. That's what lil firash. The child belongs to the bed. It means the marital bed, meaning the child belongs to the marriage. So therefore, the child will be ibn of the husband. Does it make sense? So Islam encourages when zina happens, covering it because it benefits the innocent. It benefits the innocent. That's not the issue. The surname system, to be honest, like back in the old English system, it was not too dissimilar to Islamic culture, because surnames were tribal names. Do you understand? Like Hashimi. Do you understand? So Hashimi, Umawi, these types of names, right? Al-Thaqafi, these types of tribal affiliations were what surnames were. Do you understand? We just had a different one. In the subcontinent, the culture was different. People weren't known in that way. It wasn't formalized. People's tribal affiliations were informal. So people named themselves whatever they want. And then the British system came along, and it was like, and obviously some of that became law. And now it's like, oh, give them surnames. So people are like, oh, Chalo Mia. Khan. You understand? Oh, like, oh, what's his surname? Oh, I don't, and etc. Chaudhry. But that was never a surname. That was a title because of something to do with the Brits, right? They just turn because you need a name, so you just, it's like, oh, my name has two parts. Saifullah. Ullah lelo. Ullah becomes, that's what happened. That's basically what happened. All right. So this is nothing to do with the Shari'i ruling surrounding these issues. Ultimately, it's about being known as somebody's child. Do you understand? Where so in the Arab culture, everybody was known as Ibn so and so, Abu so and so. Does that make sense? So now it's like, hang on, ud'uhum li abaihim. Yes, you've adopted him. Yes, everybody thinks he's like a child. Yes, he sees you as his father. Zayd ibn Haritha, famous story, right? His father found him. He was sold into slavery, he was kidnapped and sold into slavery. Then his family tracked him down. They wanted him. They tracked him down, reached the Prophet's house. The Prophet ﷺ gave Zayd the choice. And Zayd chose to stay with the Prophet ﷺ. So he clearly sees the Prophet as his father. That's not the issue. But Allah did two things to make society understand that as much as Zayd thinks of the Prophet ﷺ as his father, he's not his father. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first forbade him from using his name. Zayd can't use your name. Then, do you know what? We're going to make it really uncomfortable. You're going to marry his divorcee. You understand? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he affirmed the marriage in the Quran. Right? فَلَمَّا قَضَى زَيْدٌ مِّنْهَا وَطَرًا زَوَّجْنَاكَهَا. When Zayd was done with her, had divorced her, do you understand? We married her to use. And so Zaynab radiallahu anha was really proud of that. She used to say, oh, my marriage was done in the heavens. Allah married me. I don't know. I don't. Some people say that, but I don't know. I don't know if that's. I don't know the tahqiq on that. Meaning whether there was an actual nikah done, given that Allah said zawajnakaha. I mean, yeah. I mean, I suppose from that point of view, if Allah has done your marriage, why do you need a nikah? But I don't know if an actual nikah was done. I've not done the tahqiq on that. Okay. So these are the rules. So at least some of the rules, anyway. You understand? So which means that it's hard because people are selfish naturally. And fostering adoption from an Islamic point of view is an entirely selfless act. Breastfeeding children, meaning the fostering through breastfeeding in Arab culture, was what the consequence was. Tahrim al-rida'a. The consequence was that they became your mahrams. But the social construct was that it was employment. It was a form of employment. It was a you know, there was the created social there was a sense of social dependency. The foster mothers used to financially benefit from fostering children. Right? So all of these other things, they can be there. These additional elements can be there, but there are some important key rules. So in rida'a, the rule is, or you have to acknowledge hurmat tahrim al-rida'a. Then when it comes to fostering a child, you have to consider that, okay, just because you fostered a child and they live in your home doesn't mean you can just relax and treat them like they're your own children. Do you understand? No, you still have to respect boundaries. And you have to kind of set yourself up in that way. You have to set your home up in that way and so forth. And then you've got adoption. Yes, there's the adoption system and the adoption agencies and the legal frameworks in the UK and so on and so forth, but they are not your children. Do you understand? You are benefiting a child. In the olden days, the equivalent of that was kafalatul yatim. Right? Kafalatul yatim. So therefore, probably, rather than tabanni, a proper term is kafala. Kafala is a better term. That in Islam, actually, you don't adopt, right? You take responsibility. You take charge of a child, and you care for that child, and you financially assist that child, and so on. Government pays you no problem. When people used to do kafala of a yatim, it was permissible shar'an to take payment from the wealth of the yatim. You could take payment from the inheritance of that orphan. So that bit's fine. Now the government pays you no problem. Do you understand? But it's kafala. And all of those rules of being good to an orphan and etc., all of that matter. Ana wa kafirul yatim kahatain. Right? And all of this stuff applies to, for example, the concept of adopting a child. Okay. This topic has gone on for too long. Change the subject. Change the subject.
I have some questions on the same topic.
Oh, on it. What can I do? Huh?
Like that breast milk suckling thing.
Mm.
If marriage happened and they found out after the marriage, and there were children in that family.
Oh man, but Allah forbid it. Go to a mufti. I don't know.
No, nothing happened to me.
That's one of those difficult scenarios, right? Okay, best case scenario, some mufti sahib gives you a controversial fatwa that, you know, it's okay. They'll find some sort of loophole for you that allows you to stay married. Worst case scenario, the marriage isn't valid.
But when we are saying that even when real zina happens, we are saying the children should be because they were innocent and we were.
Yeah, but that's different. That's already mandated in Sharia. That scenario is already mandated. The Sharia has already accommodated for that. It hasn't accommodated for a scenario where two foster siblings have married each other without knowing. Do you understand? There's no accommodation for that. In that scenario, either you have to see if there's some sort of workaround in the Sharia, which means go to a mufti or somebody, and if there's no workaround, then it means you've got to go your separate ways.
Yeah, divorce is fine. Children. Right.
What do you mean, children?
I mean, if there were children through that marriage.
Oh, this is all of it. So, what happens to the children? Yeah. This is all modern kind of complications, right? Listen, this is the reality. In traditional Islamic societies, right? People married, they stayed married for a few years, they divorced. What happened to the children?
Yeah,
exactly.
You understand? It wasn't a major issue, right? Fathers are responsible for children. When it's in the children's interest to be with the mother, they're with the mother. When it's in the children's interest to be with the father, they're with the father. Financially, the father is always responsible. Does that make sense? Children maintain a relationship with both. If you get married if a woman marries another man and she has children from a previous marriage, those children come visit her. This man also understands she has children from other families. The Prophet ﷺ married Khadija radiallahu anha. She had children from previous marriages, right? Do you understand? Those children were considered part of the Prophet's household. They used to regularly come and go to the Prophet's house. Do you understand? So the whole kind of emotional hang-ups and territorial hang-ups and getting all jealous and weird, and that's all modern nonsense, modern drama. Do you understand? This was never an issue before. Just because a couple split up, right? The lines of responsibility are clear. You understand?
And then
I mean, there's this verse in the Quran, right? You know, it just shows you how rational people were about this, about marriage, divorce, and so on, and how they were easily able to quickly move on from the emotional aspect. I mean, obviously, some people had deeper relationships, and it was difficult to get over a marriage and so on. But Allah says, والمطلقات يتربصن بأنفسهن ثلاثة قروء ولا يحل لهن أن ينكحن أزواجهن إذا تراضوا بينهم بالمعروف. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when a woman is divorced, or I believe it's in the context of a divorcee or in the context of a widowed woman. So this is a woman whose husband has died. So it's more emotional attachment, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you know, we know that you think when a woman becomes available after her husband, we know that you think of them.
Yes.
Do you understand? Right? Don't propose to them until they're done with their waiting period. Do you understand? Even though we know that you think and you're impatient to do so. Do you understand? Right? علم الله أنكم ستذكرونهن ولكن لا تواعدوهن سرا إلا أن تقولوا قولا معروفا. Allah knows that you're thinking of them, you're thinking about it, you want to marry this woman whose husband has passed away. But don't secretly try to make any arrangements. Don't promise them secretly, I'm going to marry you once your waiting period is over. But just, you know, do the normal social thing. You know, perhaps look out for them, or perhaps make sure that, you know, etc., etc. The point being, Allah is talking about a woman moving on from her husband dying after 4 months and 10 days and khalas. Right? Meaning people got over this stuff. People were much more rational about these things back then. Do you understand? And the question of children and responsibility in tribal societies, the children belong to the tribe anyway. It doesn't matter who, like who's getting married, who's getting divorced, and so on and so forth. Those things happened. It was normal. Do you understand?
And then the khidma part you brought up, that daughter-in-law doing khidma to father-in-law. In that case, the marriage breaks or don't go close to that. Is that the
No, if a father-in-law is, according to some of the fuqaha at least, if a father-in-law becomes, he is aroused by his daughter-in-law's touch, it results in tahrim. حرمة مصاهرة حرمة المصاهرة وتحريم المصاهرة. So you remember I gave you all the different types of tahrim. One of them is tahrim through marriage. An extension of tahrim through marriage is tahrim through zina. An extension of tahrim through zina is tahrim through arousal. Do you understand? So therefore, this is a really bad case scenario, but it's real. It happens, right? Where, father-in-law is, he's still a young man, right? But culturally becomes a little bit relaxed around his daughter-in-law. Do you understand? And then starts to develop attraction, and then he's relaxed also about his daughter-in-law's touching him, because culturally, khidmat and pressing the legs and all of this stuff, right? All of this goes now, right? And do you understand? But he's got issues. He has issues. Now, according to some of the fuqaha, if he gets aroused by his daughter-in-law's contact, do you understand? Then she becomes haram for his son. She becomes haram for his son. Hurmat al-musaharat, right? So now she is haram for, yeah. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that it happens, because the Shari'i hukum, the Shari'i ruling, and there is some difference of opinion about this, but the Shari'i ruling is that it has to result, if the man is aroused, then it's a problem, right? But my point is, if that's a possibility, do you understand? Fitna is fitna, shaitan is there. If that's a possibility, then don't create a family norm where your daughter-in-law is in constant physical contact with you. Does that make sense? What kind of stupidity is that? You understand? Right? She's supposed to be doing khidmah of her husband. Do you understand? You get your daughters to do your khidmah, and your sons. It's a cultural anomaly. This is a cultural weird strangeness. Where does it come from? It comes from Hinduism. It comes from Hinduism. Muslims in India have been in close proximity to Hinduism, and in Hinduism, daughter-in-laws do all of this stuff. Do you understand? Right? So we've ended up doing it. Whereas this is not an Islamic norm. You understand?
The vice versa, the mother-in-law case as well. When she's elderly, usually, I was like maybe 70s, 80s, I don't know.
The rules are the same.
They do, because sometimes, because they can't mobility wise.
That's different, though, isn't it? But in those, people are unlikely to be sexually aroused in that moment. Do you understand? Right? If, like, I had to have a prolonged discussion about this. It's uncomfortable, but when somebody is physically having his legs pressed or something like that, there is sustained contact in a relaxed atmosphere. Do you understand? My sheikh used to say that if he ever catches a student, right, doing this kind of physical khidmah of a teacher, he would sack the teacher. What was he talking about? Why was he being so strict about it? Because he found it disgusting, because he understood that the shaitan would create other problems in that situation. It's very, very common. It's very, very common. Do you understand? And we've gone and I've massaged rubbed oil on a teacher or something, because we were always encouraged to do khidmah. It was only the sheikh that I'm talking about. It was my sheikh in Bangladesh, the one I studied Bukhari with, right? When he made that comment, I had this jolt. I was 19, 20 at the time, right? I had this sudden, I was like, oh my God, you know what? He's so right.
Yeah.
Right? He's so right. This is exactly the attitude. This should be completely outlawed.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Because of there's nothing principally, because of the possibility of abuse. Do you understand? Adults should not be taking khidmah from young people.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Right? Me, kind of, brother, two adults is a different story. But kids, young people, 15, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, no way. Does that make sense? Because there's a power differential that the shaitan takes advantage of. So, I suppose, since we've talked about it, gosh, this is on YouTube. Since we've talked about it, we should talk about the fact that these are not potential harms. The problem of sexual abuse in the Muslim community is a massive problem, right? And people have to own up to this and safeguard against it. It's like, oh no, we can't talk about this, keep it brushed under the carpet. Do you understand? And who suffers? It's the kids, it's the youngsters that suffer. It's young girls and young boys that suffer, right? At the hands of, whether it's at the hands of somebody having a moment of madness, right? Or it's because somebody is an actual predator. Do you understand? And they're doing it again and again and again to different children. Whatever the situation may be, people have to be alert to it. It's like, oh, all the families got together, all the cousins are playing with each other. There's a 16, 17-year-old cousin brother who's playing with his 11-year-old cousin sister, and it's all good in the name. How wonderful is my family? Look how big our family is. Do you understand? And then 15 years later, you find out that poor girl is traumatized by the fact that cousin brother abused her. Do you understand? And you're like, oh no, how did this happen? It happened because you let it happen. Because you were absolutely unaware, oblivious to the fact that there are guidelines to this. Do you understand? The Prophet ﷺ, he told us, command your children to pray at the age of 7. Discipline them if they don't pray at the age of 10. Right? But then there's one more part to the hadith. Separate them in their beds. Right? Children should not share beds after the age of 10. That's siblings. Do you understand? The Prophet ﷺ forbade khalwa. Right? If there's khalwa between a man and a woman, then the third is the shaitan. Right? In a family gathering where families are unaware, they're not paying any attention to this stuff, it's all well and good in innocence, there's khalwa happening upstairs in room after room after room. There's cousin brothers and cousin sisters and relatives and confiding in one another, having private conversations. Khalwa is happening. Totally haram, even if nothing happens. Even if nothing happens, it's totally haram. Right? Haram kabira. Do you understand? But people are still doing it, and they're allowing, and then they wonder why abuse happens. And then you've got teenage children, right? They have to be educated about this stuff, so that they feel warned. They feel warned, because often this stuff happens innocently in a moment of madness, right? So you've got they have to be warned early. Look, you're becoming sexually aware. These are the fitnas of sexual awareness. These are the fitness of this is what it means when it comes to feeling arousal and so on and so forth. This is what it does to you, right? And it's normal. This is how you overcome it. Fasting is an option, and also there are serious dangers like A, B, C, and D. Do you understand? These things have to be openly discussed. You know, when you make something taboo that is a normal part of life, there are dangers. Right? Oh, now mum doesn't want to talk to daughter, dad doesn't want to talk to son. They're going to learn from the internet. They're going to learn from school. They're going to learn from their PHEC teacher. They're going to learn from those people. They're going to learn from books. Most kids, the first time they encounter indecent content, it's from a book. You know, the phones and all of this. Nowadays, it's phones, right? But mostly, it's anime. It's comics. It's stuff like that. That's where it begins from. Do you understand? Parents are oblivious. Children are consuming sexual content from comic books. Yeah. Do you understand? And novels, and then obviously that creates that triggers, and then they're looking. Then they find an opportunity, and they don't know how to control themselves, because they have no concept of control, because it's never been discussed with them. Do you understand? Right? So now what's happening? Allah forbid it, but across our communities, you have abuse between siblings, right? Cousins, it's rife. Do you understand? You have. Look, I know cases where, like, elders in the family, immediate family elders, have sexually abused their nephews and nieces. Do you understand? And the family has brushed it under the carpet, to the extent, right, that in subsequent family meetings months later, that uncle is coming back into the house where the victim is living. And the mother is allowing it because it's her brother. Her brother is the abuser, right? She wants to brush it under the carpet. She expects her daughter to forget about it, and she's inviting him back into the house. This kind of insanity, by the way, these are actual cases I'm talking about. Yeah. So actual cases. Do you understand? Like the young child has, and the young child has confided. The young child has confided. Right? So it's like, how can we not address this stuff when the victims are children? And they have trauma. They have trauma. And then this stuff is happening in masajid, right? Where is the imam that's committing the abuse? Because people are human beings are human beings. Do you understand? If we create a culture of hiding these things, then there's no accountability. So the deviant person will get away with his deviancy, right? I know this one sister, and I hope she gets tawfiq in this work. And I do hope we have projects in the future, our own projects, right, where we tackle this stuff. I know this sister who's been trying to deal with this. She's an alima. She's been trying to deal with this type of situation, what we call, I mean, this is not a very nice term, but this spiritual abuse in the context of spiritual authority, imams and people like that. And she knows of cases where the guy has committed the abuse in one community. The community didn't take decisive action against him. Or he's just moved away to another town and become an imam over there. Do you understand? Right? And the guy there's no remorse. He's not making tawbah. There's no evidence that he's made tawbah. So what did those kids do over there? What did the women in that community do that they have to end up with a predator as their imam? This is the problem. So because we don't talk about it, we don't discuss it, etc., we don't own the problem. You understand? So now it's like, it's in the news, astaghfirullah. Or this is the worst one. It's in the news, the guy's been convicted. No, this is some sort of conspiracy. How can a alim do this? This can't happen. This is some sort of conspiracy against the guy. Yes, it could be, but you also need to wake up and smell the coffee and recognize that an alim can do it and does do it. Yeah, they stand for him. They stand for him.
You just said once, just trust is not a replacement for protection, security. Like if
you have to safeguard it.
Car, you still have to wear your seatbelt, right?
Yeah, safeguard it.
But you have to.
Yeah, you still have to wear a seatbelt. That's a good example. You trust my driving, but you still have to wear a seatbelt. Same thing. When I was in Umrah, I spoke to a friend. This is a less comfortable example. This is a less uncomfortable example. And I've spoken to you guys about it many, many times. And it's really close to my heart, because the percentage of children that are affected by this one is much higher, right? And I finally decided that I'm going to do something about it. So I spoke to somebody in Umrah. and we strategized. We had a whole strategy session in the hotel in Mecca, and we said we would launch a foundation specifically to tackle the abuse of children through physical chastisement. So, you know, this situation of Muslim children being physically abused in the name of Islam through brutal beatings while they're learning Quran or they're learning, etc., etc. You know, the mollis up in the masjid, slapping up kids, however he feels like it. Do you understand? I decided that enough is enough. We have to do something about it, and it has to be done internationally, right? Because look, you know what I spoke about in the khutbah. Knowing something is haram is a reality external to you. Owning that and manifesting that in yourself is a different matter altogether. Do you understand? And sometimes people don't make the connection. They don't make the connection of the ruling to their practice. They don't make the connection, right? When I was in Darul Uloom, one of my teachers, Allah bless him, I remember at the time thinking, this is so bizarre. It's like I was having this out of body moment, right? So I'd gone through Hifd in Darul Uloom. Alhamdulillah, Allah protected me, right? But my goodness, what I got to witness was just brutal, right? And I always used to make dua that Allah don't put me through it because I am not going to take it. You know, I used to always tell myself, if anybody does it, what I've seen with my own eyes, what I've witnessed, if it happens to me, I'm taking that guy out. I don't care how long his beard is. I don't care what kind of big motive he is. I'm taking his eye. If I have to gouge his eyes, I'll do it. But nobody's beating me like that. I used to have this mindset. But at the same time, I used to study hard and I used to make dua that Allah don't put me in that situation. And Allah protected me for the most part. And when I did end up in a difficult situation, it was against a guy that I couldn't take on. I knew I couldn't take him on. I knew he would crush me. So I went to my dad, right? And my dad took action. Decisive. Do you understand? That guy never touched me again. Do you understand? But it was completely normalized and still is in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Egypt, all across the board. It's normalized, right? So here we are in a logic class, and the teacher is a mufti. I'm going to take his name, right? He's very well known, very senior, right? Mufti Musa Badat Sab, Hafidahullah. And I had a really naughty class. Like some of these guys, man, I used to get into fights with them because of their misbehavior. And if they ever see this video, they'll remember, right? Really like difficult class to control, right? And Mufti Sahib has just got this class, you know, this is first year, it was our third year in the Alimiyah. And one of the really naughty kids misbehaves in his class, right? And Mufti Sahib is really patient, really quiet, really gentle. This guy, yeah, wali of Allah, yeah. So eventually he's had enough, and he's like, "Oh, I have to do something about this kid," right? So he says, you know, come here, and so he takes a miswak, and he goes, like symbolic, you know, tap, and everybody in the class starts sniggering. Like, what's that about? You know, you don't understand. And then he turns around and goes, "You're laughing." He turns around and goes, "You're laughing. On the day of judgment, the punishment of a teacher and the wrong of the child will be measured. If the teacher's punishment is more severe than the crime, the teacher will be punished." You understand? And it was one of those moments in your life where, you know, it restores your faith. You know, it restores your iman. You have these experiences that really shake you, right? And then you have this moment of like, oh, okay, so I'm not going mad. You know, like Islam is against this. You know, because he knew in my because I'm serious about my studies, right? And I'm in the books and stuff. I'm like, yeah, the books are against it. Allah doesn't like oppression. The fuqaha clearly, but what am I? Why is it that this is all contradictory against what I'm saying? I need confirmation. I needed an elder to say it, and he said it, and I felt, oh, alhamdulillah, big sigh of relief in that moment. But has it changed anything? Do you understand? He was teaching in that institution, down across the corridor from where he was teaching his class. Do you understand? Right? The smacking is happening, the beating is happening, the sticks are happening, all of this stuff is happening. It's all stopped now, of course. We're talking long. It's all stopped now because of the law, because the law stepped in and banned it all, right? So everybody's like, we don't need to talk about this stuff. We do need to talk about it because it's still happening across the ummah. Do you understand? And you should be ashamed of yourselves that it had to be stopped by the law. You didn't make sure it stopped because of Islam. Right? And anybody who's brutally beaten children in the past should ask their forgiveness. I'll end with that. That's a very, anyway, I'm going to, inshallah, if Allah gives us tawfiq, we should do something about this stuff. Your village, you have a madrasa, you fund it. You give money to it. Do you understand? You better make sure that children aren't being abused there. They're not being brutally beaten there. Do you make sure of that? Nobody pays attention. It's normal over there. It's not normal because Islam doesn't allow it. If it was within the framework of permissibility of Islam, for example, you know, like Islam allows polygyny. Islam allows a man to take multiple marriages, right? It's not something that you can do in this country. It's illegal, but it happens in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Okay, that's something you can't object to because the Sharia allows it. Do you understand? But in this country, beating children is haram, is illegal. Do you understand? But it's happening in Pakistan. Over there, it's their cultural norm. It's okay. No, it's not okay because that's haram in Islam. So we have to do something about it. Does that make sense? So inshallah.
Question actually. I came in late.
Yeah, we went on a bit of a journey today. We had all kinds of conversations and came back to this, which I've talked about repeatedly.
But actually, it's an important topic because, for example, I know of a large family where there's been sexual abuse of children by family members.
Yeah.
And I think it started like years ago by a particular person.
I've counseled victims in their adulthood. They're in their 30s and 40s.
Well, the family kind of buried that, but then it happened with other people. They were kind of a charitable family. They used to bring people over from Bangladesh, and amongst them. And just because someone's from Bangladesh or a Muslim name doesn't mean they're a human being. Well, they are a human being.
Yeah, we know what you mean.
So in this instance where sometimes you hear that it's one of their own family members, you hear it. I mean, you don't necessarily have evidence of it, but you hear it and you know it's actually true because you've heard it. You know, people have effectively tried to kind of deal with it internally. What's your and the internal dealing with it has been totally inadequate, like you say. They allow these people back in, or they
allow them back into the family. They allow them to get back into the space. Oh my goodness, like the emotional space, the emotional paradigm, if you like, the emotional universe of the victim.
Yeah. So the one individual who I'm aware, he's kind of admitted to his ex-wife that this happened to him, which is one reason why he kind of went off the rails, went on drugs, and they couldn't work out what was wrong with him. He's in his 40s now, and his life is kind of disintegrated. And they just refused to believe him or refused to acknowledge it, or just thought, this is something where we need to draw a boundary. You just need to accept it. So they actually didn't take any action. But in this situation, for example, I could have just, phoned the police and said, this is what I've heard. Yeah. But, And this is what you just heard. You know,
Yeah. So there's.
What do we do? How do we take this?
So there's a difference. So if you want this, there's a difference between me hearing something and considering what I should do, right? At the end of the day, that's hearsay. So this is one thing. The other thing is dealing with the issue at the global level. At the global level, we've got to create a situation where the victim is empowered to do something about it when it is possible for it to be investigated. Does that make sense? 20 years down the line, it can't be investigated. It boils down ultimately to testimony. It ultimately boils down to testimony. And often convictions happen because one victim comes forward and then multiple victims come forward and then it happens, right? And obviously those types of scenarios are open to abuse. Do you understand? And you're never going to know the details of any individual case. What we really want in these situations is we want to wake up and realize that there is a huge amount of preventative work that needs to happen. It's difficult to deal with a lot of the old stuff. All we can, the only really effective way to deal with it is to at least be open for the sake of counseling people. You don't have to, you're not a judge, right? We're not judges. Do you understand? We're not police. We're not criminal agents. We're not crime fighting agencies. Okay. It's up to people whether they want to report a crime and so on. Right. And we don't have to believe either side. It's not our job. But ad-deenun nasiha, counseling one another, right? Counseling one another is part of deen. Does that make sense? And therefore people should be able to open up to others about this, and we should counsel them and help them overcome their grief and their pain and their trauma. We should assist them with that without necessarily having to be put into a situation of needing to believe or disbelieve, because that's a criminal issue. That's a matter of evidence. The person may need the counseling and might not want to report it, but they still should have access to the counseling confidentially. We don't even have that. We don't even have that in our communities, right? Because of how limited the scope of our work is, you know, even in the context of a masjid. Do you understand? You know, it's like recently I've been repeatedly advising that let's do a works audit for the masjid. Meaning, let's preempt things, right? Be strategic. Work out what's all of the work that the community needs from imams. Okay? And you do a full analysis. They need salah to be led, one. Madrasa to be run, yes. People to teach children in the madrasa, for there to be classes for adults, for there to be halaqas, for there to be this, that, and the other, for there to be counseling, for there to be alliance, for there to be collaboration with schools and other youth work providers and so on, for there to be youth work, for there to be, you know, counseling for men, counseling for women, you know, do all of that, right? Lay out the full landscape, right? And then ask yourself, okay, well, we can't do all of that. No, a good start would be to say, okay, all of that would cost £500,000 a year. All of that would cost £500,000 a year in the ideal scenario. But we can't do all of that, right? We don't have £500,000 a year. We have £150,000 a year. Okay, with £150,000 a year, walk yourself back. Do you understand? See how much you can cover, how much of that you can cover for £150,000. Then see what's left. And if any crucial elements are left, go to the community and say, guys, these crucial elements are left over. We need you to donate another £50,000 a year so that we can bring in a counselor, a male counselor, a female counselor, or at least we can get these services on a consultancy basis. Do you understand? Every masjid up and down the country does the reverse. It does the opposite. Let's work out how many imams we can make do with. Oh, we can make do with one. Okay, for the next 30 years, we'll have one imam. To hell with what the community needs. Doesn't matter. All that matters is we can manage with one imam, And that's going to save us money because, that's only going to be like whatever amount a month, khalas. And the masjid will not go into deficit, and we will be able to show surplus, and we'll be able to build a new wudu area. We'll be able to change the carpet every couple of years. Do you understand that? And this is fundamental structural problems. Do you understand? Which is why we can't deal with these things. Obviously, we have to start by acknowledging the problems. So like when we started doing the madrasa, one of the first things I did a risk analysis. We looked at all of the risks that the children face, and we said, okay, now we're going to use that. We're going to use that risk analysis, and then we've done the preemptive work, and then one by one, we're going to figure out how to mitigate all of these risks. We have to get ahead of the problems, do you understand, rather than constantly chasing our tails. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq, inshallah ta'ala. Anyone watching online, barakallahu feekum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq, make dua for us, inshallah. May Allah protect us, protect our children and our youth, and give them all and us afiyah, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, he's off now.